everybody, how is it going? It's your boy, it is Snake Martin, and I'm back with another video for you. Today, I'd like to talk about difficulty in games. Specifically, games that I've beaten that I consider the hardest games, or some of the hardest games, that I've ever had to face and defeat. This comes on the back of the video last week when I talked about Disney games, and a lot of people in the comments said about how they struggled with some of the Disney games as well when they were kids. So this leads me back to a game that I beat as a kid, which I mentioned before, Toy Story 2. Now, this game isn't too challenging the whole way through, but there are a few really tricky bosses to beat, especially the last boss in this game, which was essentially a brick wall of difficulty. It was so difficult to overcome. Spoilers, if you are going to play this anytime soon, you have to fight the three main bosses of the game at the same time. And they do really hard attacks, and they are the exact same bosses that you struggled to beat earlier in the game, but together as one. It's not like, for example, the Batman Arkham games, where all the enemies patiently take turns to attack you. No. These bad boys attack you all at the same time. So this, for me, is genuinely one of the hardest games I've beaten because of how hard that wall was. Until the end, it was alright. You don't even have to do all the objectives. But once you get there, this game, really tough. Now, moving on to something a little bit more modern, I'd like to talk about the Soulsborne games. That includes Dark Souls, Bloodborne, everything that's not from software as well. So we've got things like Lies of P, The Surge, stuff like that. Now, out of all these games, I mean, they could all live on this list, to be honest. I've beaten all the Souls-likes and Soulsborne games that I've ever played. But there's one game that isn't really a Soulsborne, it's more like a Souls-like that From Software made, which I think is the toughest. But only if you can't get to grips with it, because it plays so differently, and that is Sekiro. I actually don't find this game too hard at all, because it's essentially a rhythm game where it's all based around action. So the way you block and deflect attacks is all by tapping L1. And it's all done in a very timing thing that a lot of people would have been used to now with things like Expedition 33. You have to do the timing perfectly to avoid your damage. And a lot of people can't get to grips with it. They just can't. You can't rely on just holding down the block button because eventually it'll stab you. You have to get good at this game to beat it. The bosses in this game are unrelenting. They are so tough. It is very difficult. With the Dark Souls games and Elden Ring, I feel like you can make a build that kind of helps you against any boss. While with this, you just have your sword. There isn't builds really. Essentially, it is you and your sword, and that's all you've got. Unlimited stamina, but and I found this game incredible. I'm pretty good at rhythm games, and it just clicked with me. But everywhere I go and look and I talk to my friends about it, so many had a massive problem with this game. And that is why I think it's one of the hardest games I ever beat. Even though, weirdly, I didn't find it very difficult at all. Genuinely. Odd. Another one, similar to the rhythm-esque nature of Sekiro, is Cuphead.
This match will get red hot. Here goes.
Cuphead is a brilliant game. It's based off these old school kind of cartoon things. And it's pretty, it's beautiful. They actually even made it into a real cartoon called The Cuphead Show. And it is one of the hardest bullet shooter hells out there. I'm talking ones that I've played. I know there will be harder games than this, I'm sure, in terms of bullet hells. Ikaruga comes to mind. I've got that, never beat it. Very difficult. Maybe I'll put it on the list. I'm putting it on the list. And yeah, this is one of the hardest ones I've played. And it's definitely one of the more popular ones. Again, this was one that kind of just clicked with me. I died a lot, don't get me wrong, but you have unlimited lives. So you can just keep on going. It's more of the war of attrition with Cuphead. Now, getting through each boss, because it is basically a boss rush type game, is the tricky bit. They all have different moves, they all have different things you have to learn and attack, and how you dodge certain things. You've got to be good at your timing, your jump parries. You've got to be good at getting in close and getting back and getting close and getting back to just make the most damage you can. Now, I beat that game again. I thought it was all right. I didn't find it too bad. It was just one of those things you just have to kind of stay calm under pressure, and eventually you'll beat the game. But this was a brick wall to a lot of people, and I guess it's one of those things where if you haven't got as much time, then it's going to be an absolute killer for you. But Cuphead, I think, one of the hardest games I've played for sure, but not necessarily for me. But it is really, really hard. I want to go back to the past now, back to the past. And one game I beat this year, which I never thought I would, and I didn't want to cheat, and I kind of did cheat, was this. So this is the Mega Games Pack 2. It's this bad boy here, Revenge of Shinobi. What a game. It is one of the best games, I think, ever. I think it's so good. The one that I actually played it on emulator because I wanted the original version. This game's quite fascinating because Japan back in the day just put random things in their games. And you get to fight Spider-Man, who turns into Batman at one point. And I'm not talking about it looks like Spider-Man and it looks like Batman. It's literally Spider-Man. Godzilla's in it, Terminator's in it, Rambo's in it. They just kept nicking loads of real intellectual properties, and it made the game amazing because you just didn't know who you were going to fight next. However, it is one of the hardest games I've ever come across. I beat it this past year, 2025, for the first time in my life. There was a thing back in the day called continues, and you didn't have infinite lives. I know it's crazy. A lot of you will know this, but why was it so hard to get through this game? It was just excruciatingly difficult. You'd have bullets flying at you from everywhere. They did mad damage. If you play on the harder difficulty, it's basically one hit and you're dead. Wouldn't recommend it. I just beat it on normal, and I won't lie, I'm taking the credit for life. And yeah, it is so tricky. I wanted to do it without using a game over, so I didn't want to use save states. That was my thing. And there's a level very, very close to the end, pretty much the last level of traversing before you get to the boss levels. What it is it's a labyrinth, and it's very difficult. I think the only way you would ever beat this is if you painstakingly played it over and over and over and over and over again, which is what I did to get good at the game, to get to the end. But the labyrinth was just, if I'm honest, it took the absolute mick. Now, I got through it because I used a guide, and I do feel bad for it, so technically I cheated in a way, but I did manage to do what I set out to do, which was beat it within one whole go. So no game overs, no save states, just straight through. And I'm really proud of myself for doing that. Revenge of Shinobi, if you think things like Dark Souls are hard, you ain't seen nothing, because this is the pinnacle of difficulties back in the day. There's no way, I mean this, there's no way people today would be able to deal with it. It's only because I was streaming it and I'm a psychopath is how I got through that, and I mean that. One that I wanted to talk about as well, I'm not going to talk about this one much because I don't think it's particularly hard, but I have beat it, is Abe's Odyssey. This game is a great, fantastic game. It's one where you've got to navigate through the hell holes of Oddworld and get out of Rupture Farms and save your fellow Madokans. It's so good. The storytelling in this game, I think, is way ahead of its time. I'm pretty sure this came out before Metal Gear, but the story is as impactful to me as something like that through the way that it's told with cutscenes and stuff. Genuinely, I think this game is ahead of its time. And the difficulty on this is so hard. You have to do almost like puzzles to try and get your Madokans to be freed. And getting them through absolute hell with essentially just being able to speak to them is so tricky. So tricky. Now, I beat this game and I was happy that I got the worst ending. I didn't save everybody that I should have saved. And I'm counting that as a victory. But to whoever has managed to save, I think it's 100 or 101 Madoke guns, something like that. Absolute. If I was wearing a hat, I haven't got a hat nearby. Why? If you manage to beat that, hats off to you, boys. I just want to talk briefly about this next game as well before we get to the final game I'd like to talk about today. Jak 2 Renegade. Jak 2 Renegade. If you played this as a kid, you'd have figured out that this game was made by adults to torture kids, because this game is a GTA clone. It's very different to Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy, but it gets really tough. Like, so many of my friends as kids never beat it. I managed to beat this as a kid. I don't know how I managed to do it, but there's like a few really tricky missions towards the late stages of the game that are genuinely solid levels. I wanted to mention this because it is super duper difficult compared to the rest of the trilogy and like the extra games as well, like Lost Frontier, which kind of carried it on. Really tricky game to beat, but really good nonetheless. And finally, I'd like to talk very briefly with you about Donkey Kong Country. If you watched my streams last year, you'll know how much that game, that franchise, took from me. I beat Donkey Kong Country 1, 2 and 3. There's a few that stick out level-wise, but none more than Minecart Madness. Why? Why did they do that to us? Betrayal, sadness. Donkey Kong Country 1, 2 and 3 are genuinely some of the hardest games I ever played in my entire life. It took me so long to learn that I could run. Look at me now! Look at me now, mommy! I'm a f***ing Usain Bolt! Why are the controls like how they are? Why do you do your attack and then if you hold it down, then you decide to run? On a controller that has 4 buttons, that's 3, 4 buttons, yet it uses 2. And then in the third game, randomly, it uses the shoulder buttons, but still not the other 2 buttons. It makes me feel sick. It's great. I love that I managed to do it. I never want to do it again. If you think that games are hard these days, if you look at Souls games and think they're the hardest games ever made, grow up. Grow up. Play Donkey Kong Country and tell me that that's not the hardest game you ever played. I'm actually annoyed at nobody right now, because in my head, someone's saying it out there, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm telling you. I didn't even get all the bananas or the Kong symbols, nothing. I just beat it. Don't talk to me about the last bit of Donkey Kong 3, all right? The last boss, the super last boss, I swear to God, don't talk to me. This fucking game, I swear to fucking God, I swear to fucking God. But Donkey Kong Country 1, 2 and 3, without shadow of a doubt, probably the hardest games I've ever played in my life. I think I died something like 700 times between them all. Oh my God. What's some hard games that you've beaten in your lives? These are just some of the ones that I've beaten, but I'd love to know what you've beaten that you consider very difficult. So please let me know in the comments. Thank you so much everybody for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, hit the like, hit the comment, hit the subscribe, all that jazz. I will see you in the next one. Take care and toodaloo!